Contrary to popular belief, events in the Middle East are governed not so much by a Sunni-Shia divide, but are determined much more so by the ongoing Cold War throughout the region. The Middle East Cold War's two main protagonists are Saudi Arabia and Iran. Similar to the classic Cold War between the United States and the Soviet Union, we don't expect to see battlefield confrontations between the two powers, but rather it's a contest for influence that's being played out within the domestic politics of weak Arab states. Weak Arab states often invite outside actors to support them. They do this because other countries can provide what they need, namely money, guns, and legitimacy. What ends up happening is stronger states such as Iran, Saudi Arabia, and to a lesser extent Turkey start backing proxies and allies within the domestic politics of weak states such as Iraq, Egypt, Yemen, Lebanon, and now Syria. But we also see an axis of conflict within the Sunni community between Saudi Arabia and its allies such as the United Arab Emirates against the Muslim Brotherhood with its allies such as Qatar and Turkey. Furthermore, in many of these weak Arab states, the splits are not necessarily sectarian. In both Syria and Iraq, the Kurds play a major role, and that's an ethnic identity in which the Sunni-Shia distinction isn't particularly relevant. Lebanese Christians, of course, play into this in various ways as well. The Sunni-Shia framework also distorts just who the Alawites are in relation to Iran. Iran doesn't support the Syrian regime because of religious connections. In reality, very few Iranian imams would even consider the Alawites as Shia. Syria and Iran became allies because they shared common enemies, Iraq and Israel. Over time, that alliance has grown to become incredibly strong. We can't forget that Assad stood by Iran to the very end during the Iran-Iraq War, and it seems like Iran is going to do the same here. Saudi Arabia has backed Shia politicians in Iraq and has started an open campaign against the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt, further breaking down the idea that all Sunnis are on one side and the Shias are on another. When events are depicted in this way, it furthers the myth that this conflict is somehow everlasting and has always been. The old rivalries that animated the Middle Eastern politics of the 1950s were not sectarian, they were ideological. The Lebanese Civil War was sectarian, but not Sunni-Shia, Christian-Muslim. It's the particulars of politics that are driving sectarianism, not the other way around. Another indicator that this is a Cold War instead of a conventional state versus state war is by examining the paradoxes in which power is exercised. Israel, who is the strongest military actor in the region, has less influence than Qatar, whose military power is almost non-existent. Influence in the region is determined not by military force, but with money and close relations. Israel has the money, but it doesn't have the political links to players in these weak Arab states to exercise its influence. Similarly, why are the Iranians playing this game so well? Is it their military power? I doubt it. Rather, they've ingrained themselves into the domestic politics of these weak Arab states, whether in Lebanon with Hezbollah, Syria with Assad, or most recently with the Houthi coup in Yemen. Iran is leveraging its political ties to gain influence. Iran is financing virtually every single Shia political party and several Sunni groups in Iraq right now. From Iran's perspective, it doesn't matter who is elected in Iraq, so long as they're dependent on Iran. So what has ignited this new Middle East Cold War, if not for historical, religious, or conventional military reasons? What we've seen in recent times is the rapid deterioration of state authority. It's this breakdown of authority that invites outside intervention and creates an environment where non-state actors can step in to fill that political void. Non-state actors such as Al-Qaeda. The new Middle East Cold War began in 2003 with the fall of Saddam Hussein. This is when Iraq ceased to be a player in regional politics and instead became a playing field. In 2007, we also saw the Fatah-Hamas split. It opened up Palestine as another arena to battle for influence. The Arab Spring or Arab uprisings exacerbated the Cold War by opening several new playing fields in the region in a short period of time. The collapse of Iraq, Libya, Egypt, and Syria has completely changed the balance of power and has created an environment where these non state actors can thrive, such as transnational jihadist groups like Al Qaeda or the Islamic State of Iraq and al Sham. During the 70s to the 2000s, when most Arab states were strengthening their authority, these groups could not have existed. But with the weakening of state authority and external support, these groups are now playing a much more important role than in the past. What is Saudi Arabia's response to this? Well, the Saudis have been on a losing streak in the Middle East Cold War. They lost in Lebanon when they supported the March 14th alliance, who actually won two major elections, and yet Hezbollah still remained the dominant player in Lebanese politics. They lost in Iraq when they backed Ayad Alawi, who also won the 2010 elections, but the Iranian-backed Nouri al-Maliki remained prime minister. They also suffered a loss in Palestine after Saudi King Abdullah very publicly brokered a peace between Fatah and Hamas during the Mecca Accord, only to see them fighting again within months. Which is why Syria is so important to Saudi foreign policy right now. For the Saudis, Syria is their best chance to roll back Iranian influence in the region, which is why they've gone all in to remove Assad from power. But as we said earlier, like any Cold War, there is more than one axis of conflict, and it's the inter-Sunni conflict that is becoming equally, if not more important in the struggle for regional political influence. Muslim Brotherhood electoral victories in Tunisia and Egypt seem to indicate that there is a trend towards electoral Islamic victories. The Muslim Brotherhood had direct support from Qatar, and indirect support from the Turkish AKP party. This democratic Islamism is a serious challenge to Saudi Arabia, who for decades reserved the right to define what Islam means in politics. In an ironic twist, the Saudis and Emiratis responded by supporting the most secular elements in the region against the Muslim Brotherhood. The most obvious example of this is its hand in orchestrating the coup in Egypt after a Muslim Brotherhood victory, and then overt airstrikes in Libya to roll back Brotherhood influence. If this is truly a Sunni-Shia conflict, then the Muslim Brotherhood should be an important ally in combating Iranian influence. Turkey would also seem like the perfect ally to Saudi Arabia. They both want Assad out of power, but yet there's still little coordination between the two. Instead, their relations have only become more cold, and sometimes it even looks hostile. This inter-Sunni conflict will only grow in importance in the future of Middle Eastern politics. What about the United States? Well, if the core political process driving the Middle East Cold War is state weakness, if the intensity of the Cold War is defined by the number of political arenas in which regional powers are drawn, then the United States has very little it can do to help alleviate these tensions. The end of this Middle East Cold War can only be achieved by the rebuilding of state authority, a process easier said than done. So we will often hear criticism of the United States foreign policy about how inconsistent it is. This is absolutely right. If your framework for understanding the regional politics is through this Cold War lens, then yes, the United States policy is tremendously inconsistent. The United States is supporting an Iranian-backed government in Iraq that is fighting a Sunni insurgency, while in Syria we're supporting a Sunni insurgency that's fighting an Iranian-backed government. The United States says it supports democracy, but refuses to declare what happened in Egypt a coup. At the same time, the United States is negotiating with Iran on a nuclear deal while simultaneously trying to limit Iranian influence in the region. However, from the point of view of people who make the policy in Washington, these are not inconsistencies at all, because Washington does not view the situation from this Cold War prism. It views the Middle East through a couple of core interests. Number one, of course, is the relationship with Israel, but Israel isn't really driving events in a post-Arab Spring world. Number two is a nuclear deal with Iran. They don't see this as inconsistent because a deal with Rouhani would increase Rouhani and his party's power within Iran's political system, and over time they will be able to push out hardline elements of Iranian policy, thus limiting Iran's influence in the region over the long run. And finally, the US wants to maintain some semblance of a state in Iraq, which is driving much of our engagement in the region right now. We fundamentally view Syria as less important to our interests than Saudi Arabia views Syria to their interests. Our differences here are not ones of ends, but of priorities. The United States declares that it does want Bashar al-Assad out, but we're just not willing to risk or compromise Iraq for it. Also, for the Saudis, an American nuclear deal with Iran ignores what is the more immediate threat to Saudi national security, which is Iranian regional influence, whereas the Americans view the nuclear program as the immediate threat. And we're willing to reach a deal despite Saudi concerns. In the long run, US and Saudi policy will begin to diverge as we watch this Cold War play out.